Welcome to God's Grand Story, Session 2, where Jesus will begin His ministry by moving to Capernaum, a town on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Here He calls and commissions a group of 12 men called the disciples. Maybe resonating with Jewish culture as God had chosen the 12 tribes of Israel. They stayed with Him for 3 years, traveling, learning, and praying together. Now, what's unusual about this is they didn't apply to follow this rabbi. That was the norm, but Jesus chose them, a ragtag group with lots of problems and baggage. That gives us a lot of hope, doesn't it? Because the truth is, I'm a mess, you're a mess, and we're all a mess to some degree or another. To anyone outside the faith who says the church looks like a mess, I can only say, you should see it from the inside. The term disciple simply means a learner, and that call is still true today for you and for me. We are all here because the disciples took this call seriously. I'm a disciple of Jesus today because of a youth pastor named John Collier, who poured his life into me as a teenager. Other godly pastors and leaders did this for me as well. I've just spent a year with 3 young men at our church, pouring my life into them. We eat together, pray together, study together, and hold each other accountable. Among Jesus' last words to His disciples were these: "Go and make disciples of all nations." Are you doing this? Is this a desire of your heart? You will clearly see as you study the teaching of Jesus in the New Testament that He sometimes gives an invitation, and at other times He gives a strong challenge. He gives both of these in His very famous Sermon on the Mount, found in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. He also begins to heal the sick, cast out demons, even raise the dead. Great crowds of common people begin to follow Him, but the Jewish religious leaders of the day were very suspicious and jealous of Him. Some even accused Him of getting His power from Satan. But Jesus demonstrated He had power over Satan. He also showed He had power over nature as He stilled a storm. On another occasion, a great crowd had gathered along the way late one day, and the disciples realized that this large crowd was going to be hungry. This story is sometimes called the feeding of the 5,000. But that's only how many men were there. There could have been as many as 20,000 people there. The disciples found a boy with a small lunch, but how could that feed so many people? The disciples asked Jesus just to send them away, but Jesus told them to ask the people to sit down. Then here's what Jesus did. The Bible says, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, He gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then He gave them to His disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. Not only did Jesus feed thousands of people with a tiny lunch, He was also showing the people who He was. John 6:14 says, "After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, 'Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world.'" After this amazing miracle of feeding thousands, people in the crowd wanted Jesus to take on the Romans by force. If He could do wonders with fish and bread, think what He could do with spears and swords. But Jesus had none of this and withdrew to be alone. Throughout His ministry, Jesus said only what the Father wanted Him to say, and He did only what the Father wanted Him to do. Shouldn't that be the cry of our heart? We're to take in His words and then seek to live out His ways and His works. Keeping these 3 things in balance can help you on your path as a true disciple of Jesus. Later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up to a high mountain to pray. In the Bible, mountains were often where people encountered God. And while Jesus prayed, there He was, transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and His clothes became as white as light. This is called the Transfiguration. Fully man, fully God. His deity was on display. Now it's getting close to the last days of His life on earth. Jesus travels to Judea, where He raises Lazarus from the dead, and He confronts a wealthy tax collector named Zacchaeus to follow him and to give away all of his fortune. Jesus touched the lives of so many people during his 3 short years of public ministry. In Jesus' day, the people seeking him were the poor, the diseased, and the despised. Discuss this with your group. Why were those people attracted to Jesus? And what attracted you to Jesus as well?